Hi, Misha here, and I guess you could kind of say in celebration of Star Trek Picard coming out, and also as I've been doing anyway, reviewing the Eaglemoss kind of fleet collections now that they're in their standard series, we'll look at the Borg. So I've laid out the Borg ships we've seen, most from the standard series. The only XL Borg we've received so far is the subscriber gift I showed you in several videos, but everything else has been in the standard line. To that end, and I'm counting this in, we've got the Assimilated Voyager. Now, to be fair, this is actually considered a bonus edition in the standard size. Next up, we have the Assimilated Arctic 1. Then we have the Borg Sphere. Actually, it was very early in the collection. Then we have the one that I promise you will fall off its stand at least once. The Type 3 or Renegades ship from Descent. With the one with Hugh. Then we have the peanut-shaped probe. Only seen in one episode of Voyager, but I kind of like the ship, I'm not going to lie. Then we have a different cube, whereas this one is modeled after the standard cube. This is modeled after the tactical, or class 4 cube. And then finally we have the octahedron, or diamond, used by the Borg Queen, although perhaps not exclusively. So as usual, I'll talk a bit about them and then kind of rank them how I like them. And the reason I put Voyager in here is this really should have been how the Voyager series ended. They got assimilated. Seriously, that's what had happened. But no, it goes to show you that's how a lot of Borg ships start. Both of these. They will take over ships. First, just modifying the existing ship and crew, assimilating them, and then they will start adding parts from other ships. So, in the instance of Voyager, of course, there's only a few drones on board, but they still manage to assimilate it, both internally and externally to some extent. And if the process had not been halted, as we saw with Arctic 1, they would start modifying the engines, adding Borg tech and weapons. With Arctic 1, they took over a small survey craft that was only capable of warp 1.4. They were already able to upgrade it to about warp 3, and then eventually to warp 4.9. They also encountered a Tarkalian ship, and they integrated parts of it into the design, coming out with a proton burst weapon and the classic Borg cutting beam weapon. And of course, fully assimilating the crew. And if this had been allowed to continue, it would have evolved into a sphere, or perhaps a cube. But it seems like Borg ships continue to expand and grow. They continue to assimilate as they get to raw resources or other alien ships. I'm definitely very much of the opinion that Borg ships aren't really made in assembly lines or, shipyards. I think they start out with a kernel from another alien ship or something, and then are grown from there. I think when they start assimilating, they look very haphazard. And then as they get bigger and bigger, they get more geometric, either sphere or cube, probably just depending on what they need. And I think that's really, we don't really ever get much info on this ship. But I would speculate that this is one or two alien ships that the they had assimilated and were in the process of what's called Borgifying. And so I think this too, if it had been left to its own devices, could have eventually grown into something else. Really don't know the size of this vessel. It was big and quite powerful. Spheres seem like they come in two basic sizes. There's the first contract sphere, which was between 450 and 600 meters. So big, especially when you consider that's, just the diameter and that, that it's all directions. So there's going to be a lot of internal volume. But there also seems to be a bigger sphere. Again, if they grow, this is only logical. And the bigger ones can house over 11,000 drones. And it seems like the spheres are used for long-range tactical purposes. But for maybe short-range patrol or literally probing, you do have these small ships. This model is probably pretty to scale with the Intrepid over there because they're roughly the same size. It seems like this was a little bit smaller, about 340 meters, whereas the Voyager is about 345. But it only has limited weaponry, standard shields. And these are either just like border patrol, or like I said, just a short little probe, maybe to check up on civilizations and see how they're coming along. We don't really see this except in the one two-part episode, and only in the beginning of that, where it is just called a probe. And then moving from there, we have the tactical cube. And this is essentially like a standard cube, but with added hull plating, so added armor, and presumably enhanced weaponry or other facilities. And this is our massive Borg ship. It's at least 3,000 meters across. And we know that these can have a crew of anywhere from 50,000 to 130,000. It's possible when the crew is that big, they've just got done having a giant mill of assimilated peopleses. But as big as this is, and as powerful, it's actually the smaller cube. This is often called the Type 2 cube. The Type 1 cube, i.e. the one from Best of Both Worlds, the one from Q-Who, was even bigger, at least it appeared to be on screen. And as many have said, that this further reinforces the whole growing thing, because this was kind of a long-range cube seen far outside of what was considered Borg territory. If it had been just taking a leisurely cruise through the galaxy and, having a assimilated snack along the way, it's going to put on some weight. She's going to maybe need to have a diet. But it seems like this was an even larger cube, and obviously they sent only one, intending to assimilate the entire Federation. Yeah, so we kind of have three basic cubes: Type 1, Type 2 cube, and then Tactical cube. And then finally we have the Queen's Diamond, which is the most unique shape probably here, with the most kind of activity going on. And again, we have no reason to suspect this is only used by the Queen, but it's only seen with her, and it seems like maybe this was used for kind of a fast ship. It seems well armed, although it probably doesn't have all the facilities of full planetary assimilation, but yeah. And there's not really any data on Borg ships at all, so we can't really say. As far as ranking these, I'm not really going to count the big light up cube in the back because it's its own thing. But easily, I can tell you my least favorite is the sphere. I almost don't like this one, and that's kind of rare for me. Why? Because of this. They put these holes for it to mount in. And if they just needed to put one, I would understand that. But they put one on each end, which just totally ruins the symmetry for me. It's pretty weighty, and it's a good size. Why they did that, I mean, it was early in the collection, so I think it was just kind of an early decision. Because when they did the Fisarius, much later, they just made a small cradle for it. So that's a pretty easy one for me to put it. My least favorite. How many do I have here? Yeah, so 7 here. So that would be number 7. I'm glad we have a sphere, but I just don't. My number 6 would actually be the tactical cube. For one, the outside is all plastic. The only real metal is like a core for weight. It's well done, but it's a Borg cube, and it's just so small for what it is. This would have honestly been one they probably should have at least released in the special line like they did V'ger. I get that line's mostly for the movies, but Borg cubes, one of their key identifiers is being big. And I know they could never make one to scale, but on the other hand, it is well detailed. And it sits on its stand well, as you can see. But between being small and having a lot of plastic, yeah. Number 5, I guess I'll say the probe. I seem to like this probe more than others, but maybe it's just because no one really does the probe. It too is pretty much all plastic though, except for a metal core inside, like a weight. But it scales well with Voyager, and it's just a unique Borg ship, so I'm really glad they did it. Next up, I guess I'll say the Assimilated Voyager. I think they did a good job. This is very weighty, very metal, but we have so many Voyagers in the collection now. But of course they did just do it as a bonus edition. So it's not like it was part of the regular, so props to them for that. Of course for me, just feeling it, I just feel the extra texturing, and this is textured. This isn't just a paint job, they actually did have raised greebles and tech, so I appreciate that. But it is just another Voyager. For number 3, I will say the Borg Renegade ship, or the Type 3. It's actually pretty neat. And it's got a large metal content that might kind of surprise you. The only things that really ding it, it's an awfully small model physically, considering what a big ship it was. Of course, I understand the constraints that Eaglemoss operates under, so I really don't hold it against them. There's really no way to do these ships to scale. So my other really complaint about it is just that it doesn't like to sit in and stand well. But I still think it's neat that someone did this ship, because you only see this a few times in the Star Trek universe. Number 2, I'll give it to the Queen Diamond. I think they really did a great job with this one. It is suitably large. It is actually very heavy. You'd think this would have a lot of plastic, but actually these main things are metal, with of course only the stuff being plastic, but the core of the things are metal. And it is a cool looking design. It's still Borg, but very different. And this one is the one that surprised me. My number one, I guess, will be the Assimilated Arctic 1. It's a very intricate model. It's actually pretty light because it's so detailed that it has to mostly be made plastic. I've been, from the other video reviews and things, people said there's not a lot of paint going on for it. And for me, that's not a big deal. It is mostly a physical model, so it's very interesting, and the intentional asymmetry is quite unique. And I love that it just shows the starting of the whole assimilation process. They really should have let this evolve into a sphere, and